Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. We are filming a Stashin with Stephanie video today. This is the first one of these we're doing in our new studio, which means you can see the entire collection behind me. It looks absolutely beautiful. It's a nice grayscale, which is really fun, and we're going to turn it into a night sky type pattern. It's called Celestial by Yelena Bryksenkova for FIGO. FIGO is the modern arm for Northcott, if you haven't heard of them, but it is really pretty. It has all of these celestial designs on it, so it's all those grayscales, and what we're going to do is we're going to use that to create some log cabin strips, and then we're going to have some stars in the center using 4 at a time flying geese, and that is going to be our background, so that's going to be the only really light part in it. Now the pattern instructions to go along with this are available on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. It is called Star Sign, and you can download that, or if you become a member of Stashin with Stephanie, then you'll get that plus a whole bunch of other goodies. You get a bunch of free patterns, you get 10 fat quarters for $29.99 a month plus shipping. You get first dibs on getting additional fabrics, so you can get a finishing kit like for this one, and you also get a special coupon code that's exclusive to subscribers so they can get additional fabric before everybody else, because we've been selling out within like days in the last few months. It's been just a little nuts. You guys are at home and you're sewing, and I love it. So we're going to take a little bit closer look at this fabric, and then we will get to sewing. But I'm really excited about this one. It really is combining two of my favorite blocks. We're going to have that star in the center and then the log cabin, and the setting that we're going to put it on is what makes it modern, because those are two very traditional blocks, but we kind of turn them every which way so it looks like constellations in the sky. So we're going to look at things a little bit differently today. I'm not going to have everything out and I'm going to pull it out because this is super dark and I know it's not going to show up as well as I would like it to on camera. So I'm just going to kind of describe, and we're going to kind of take a peek at things. So we've got two designs here that have this sort of elongated star. They're really pretty. We'll see this in another colorway later on. Then we have actual constellations. They're really pretty. It's a really nice use of just 3 colors in this, but it really is nice and striking. And then we have different phases of the moon. We have some celestial signs there. And then we have some of the symbols that the star signs are named after. Here's that little star print again, this time with metallic. There is quite a bit of gold metallic in this. This is actually a basic that we're putting in to help fill in, and that's what basics are great for. They can help fill in, create the overall look of the quilt, keep it the same, but it just plays nicely with everything else. We've seen this one before, but it's a little bit lighter gray. This one I love. It looks like shooting stars. This is another basic from them, from FIGO. I love this one. This one looks like hieroglyphs, I think. We have some more symbols of the astrological signs. There's that moon again in a new colorway. More of those hieroglyphs. And then another basic, this one has shooting stars, and so I thought it was very appropriate. And then we're back around. So to make 4 at a time flying geese, we're gonna start off with 1 large square and 4 small ones. And they're gonna be different sizes because we have 3 different size stars are going to be in this quilt, so make sure you're referring to your pattern instructions to know what goes with what. But what we're going to start off doing is just drawing a line on the wrong side of our squares, the little ones. We're still making some adjustments to those new studio lights now that we're in here, so I'm going to draw this line really dark so you guys can see it at home. We've got a line going from corner to corner, and what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're really angling that pen in when it's touching that line. That will make sure that you are really right in the middle, and when we're sewing, we're going to sew straight up and down that, and that will make sure that we don't end up with some wonky size flying geese. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn it on its side like this, and you're going to arrange it, and what I usually do is I just arrange this top one and bring it over to my sewing machine, and I do it as I go. I've got a nice stack of my big ones, stack of my small ones that I've marked up, and I just do it one right after another. But for this video, I'm going to show you how you could do it this way as well. well. What you could do here is you could line these up and work to really make sure that your lines are right on top of each other. You could pin across here, pin across that center, and pin across the bottom, and that would help you if you are doing this method for the first time and you really want to make sure it's perfect. But once you get the hang of it, you can arrange it as you go. What we're going to do next is, normally what we're going to do is we sew with our edge of our fabric right along the edge of the presser foot. But whenever we're sewing triangles from squares, what we're going to do is treat that line as though that is the edge of your fabric. So you're going to line up the edge of your presser foot even with the edge of that line, and you're going to treat that like it's the edge of your fabric. We're going to sew all the way down one side and then back up the other. Now, whenever I'm sewing triangles from squares, I always want to sew a scant 1/4 inch seam. That's just a little skinnier than a regular 1/4 inch seam. So I've got everything set up to sew that regular 1/4 inch seam. Then I'm just going to move my needle one needle position to the right to make it just a little bit teenier. It gives us a little bit extra wiggle room when we're trimming down later, so everything is the size it should be. All right, I'm going to move this off, and I'm just going to start with these together. All right, so I'm just going to get started sewing, and when I'm about halfway or so, I'm going to stop and I'm going to grab my piece that I already have marked over here, and I'm going to start by lining up my corners at the bottom. And then what I want to do is I want to make sure that those lines are nice and in line as well. And then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of hold that in place with my finger and keep on going until I get all the way to the bottom. Now, when you get down here, I kind of hold things with my fingertip here. You want to move your finger just to the side. That way you can maintain that nice scant 1/4 inch seam all the way down to the end of your block. If you find that your flying geese are consistently too small, there's a really good chance that you're not doing that quite right and that you might not have a consistent seam all the way through. Now, if I were doing this to make the entire quilt, what I would do is I would chain stitch. So I would grab another big piece and another small piece. I would lift up my presser foot, stick it under, and keep on going. But we're just doing one for the video today, so I'm going to go ahead and flip that around. No need to cut your threads, and I'm just going to sew straight down the other side of that line. Might be a little hard to tell on camera because this thread is really light, but if you measure the distance between your thread, it should be just a little bit less than 1/2 inch, but more than 3/8 of an inch. And that will give you your scant 1/4 inch seam as long as it's somewhere in between that. If it's more than 1/2 inch, you definitely are not going to have anything come together correctly because your flying geese are going to be too small. If it's less than 3/8 of an inch, then your seam allowance is going to be too skinny, and then you're going to have issues with wear over time. That seam could pop open over as you use it, or even just when you put it on the long arm to get it quilted and it gets stretched. So you want to make sure that you're in that sweet spot. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to cut straight down the line that I drew right in the middle of those seams. It doesn't matter if you're right on top of that line. You just don't want to be too skinny to one side or the other because, again, you don't want those seams to pop open as you're using it. All right, so now we're going to press these, and I like to press my seams open. It really gives you a lot of versatility when you come to quilt it because you can quilt right into those points, and you're not limited at all by having a bulky seam that might break your needle. Do be careful when you get to this part though. You got quite a bit going on there. So you want to make sure you're lifting and pressing to get that nice and flat. And then once I've got it good on one side, I'm going to flip it over and go from the other side as well. I'm going to go ahead and do my other one. And again, if I were doing this for the whole quilt, I would chain piece and I would do all of this at once for all the stars in my quilt. All right, so now we have two things that kind of look like hearts, and you might be thinking, Stephanie, how does this turn into flying geese? Well, you're about to see. So when I put my third square on and I've got my line going straight down, I'm going to sew straight down both sides of that line, and as long as you've done everything correctly, your needle should be coming straight through where these little valleys are when you're going in and out. And you can see that when we cut this open, we're going to have a flying geese on one side and a flying geese on the other side. Really should be flying goose, but you know, we say geese. It is what it is. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew these. Again, there really isn't a lot of reason to stack them all up like this ahead of time. What I typically do is I've got a stack of these ready to go and a stack of these ready to go, and I just kind of grab and go, and it works really efficiently that way for me. We're still sewing with the scant 1/4 inch seam here, so just go ahead and get that presser foot lined up with the line and start sewing down. Then for this next part to chain stitch, all you're going to do is lift up your presser foot and slide your next part in. So like the top part of the heart is going to fit right in with that bottom corner, and it will just go straight through. This kind of gets a little crazy when you get a long string of them, but it totally is doable. Now when you reach the end, what you're going to do is you're just going to pull everything around. No need to clip those threads, and we're going to sew down the other side. When you're going in between, what I like to do is always lift it up and arrange that again so I can maintain that 1/4 inch stitch, the scant 1/4 inch stitch, all the way down. We're going to go ahead and cut straight down these lines as well. And you can see that we now have 1 flying geese. Here's our second, and we'll have 3 and 4 as soon as I cut these as well. I'm going to press these seams open as well. We've got one last very important step before we can call these done, and that's trimming these to size. Now each one is going to be trimmed to a little bit different size depending on what size star you're working with, so make sure you refer to your pattern instructions for that. This one is going to need to cut down to 2 by 3.5. So the first thing I want to do is kind of get my 2-inch mark lined up with the bottom of my triangle, and then about halfway between that is going to be 1 3/4. So I'm trying to get that mark right at the tip of my triangle. Sometimes it doesn't always work out, but if you can get it as close as you can, that's great. The other thing I'm looking for is to make sure I'm going to cut my right and my top side first. So I want to make sure that my 2-inch at the edge of the ruler is hitting right where these seams are going together, because we always want those seams, when there's a point, to be going straight to the edge. That's what keeps everything nice and pointy when you sew your final block together. All right, so everything is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and give that a trim. You can see we didn't take too much off of that. I'll go ahead and push that to the side for now. I'm going to give this a 180-degree flip so the edges we cut are now on our left and bottom side. Now I'm going to line it up again, and this time, instead of making sure that we have a little bit of fabric hanging off the edges, I'm lining it up with a 3.5 inch exactly on the edge and the 2-inch exactly on the bottom. Also, the 45-degree line of your square ruler should be going straight down the seam where the big triangle is joining the little triangle. Once I'm satisfied with all that, I'm going to go ahead and give it a trim. Now, some of you guys may have picked up that the fabric was kind of moving forward a little bit on me and made it a little bit harder to cut this, so that way it's going straight into the corner. That's because I need to change this rotary cutter blade. It is very dull. We use this to cut orders at the shop, and it is just way too dull to do this. So if you find that your fabric is moving a lot on you as you're doing this detail work, probably time for a new blade, so make sure to switch that out. Now you can see we didn't cut too much off of this. There's just a few scraggly little scraps there, but when I lay that against another one, you can see a noticeable difference. It's smaller, it's nice and square, and there's going to be a lot less bulk, and it's going to be a lot easier to get really great results when we put this into our final block if you take this step. So I know it can be a little tedious, especially when you have a lot of flying geese, but it's so worth it. All right, so it's time to sew our blocks together. We're going to sew them into horizontal rows and then join those to complete the center. Then we're going to start going on our log cabin. I'm just going to go ahead and start by sewing the right row to the center row for all of them. Since these are relatively small and we have just trimmed everything to the exact size, I typically don't pin when I'm doing this. You do want to make sure that you put your sewing machine back to a regular 1/4 inch stitch sew at this point. All right, now when I'm sewing these together, what I want to do is I'm going to line my points up. So right here, there forms like a little V, and we want to sew just 1 needle width to the right of where that V is. And as long as we do that and we stay to the right of where that seam is, where that little triangle is, then we will make sure that we don't lose any of our points when we're sewing them together. So I just like to go nice and slow as I'm approaching that point, so I can make sure I'm sewing just to the seam side of it. And I'll sew down the end, and then we'll get this last little bit. So I'm not going to press anything until I'm actually done sewing all the rows together, but I do like to lay everything back out where it belongs, just so I can make sure that I've got everything in the right spot. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew the other side on to the rows. All right, we're gonna press these seams open as well. You gotta take extra care when you get to those points. But this will make them lie so flat and you won't have any bulk. So when you go to quilt, you really can do some really fun things with these. Hit that from the other side. And you can see we've got some really great joins there. You can see the points. We haven't cut anything off and it looks fantastic. All right, now we're ready to pin these together. I'm gonna go ahead and pin the top and the bottom at the same time so that I can whip through one side and through the other. If you're chain piecing, this will go super fast. When you're pinning with flat seams, you're gonna go ahead and flip those guys right sides together. And then I just look at it from the top to line it up to make sure those seams are right on top of each other. And then I pin right in the right side of that seam allowance, and I wanna be within that 1/4 inch seam. If I'm pinning way down here or any other place other than that, when you're sewing along, you're not going to be pinned right where you need to be for your join to keep that nice and tidy. So you want to be right in that corner of that seam. Then when we're sewing along, we're going to stop with our needle down on the first half of that seam allowance and only then pull that pin. When we keep that needle down, it kind of acts like a pin and keeps that join as nice as it can be until you can keep sewing. Go ahead and join the bottom as well. All right, so I'm kind of slowing down as I'm coming to that seam allowance. I'm going to stop with that needle down just like we talked about and only then pull that pin. Now I like to make sure that my edges are aligned here and that I'm going to go a little slow until I get to that point. Again, making sure I'm sewing just to the side of where that triangle is so I don't lose anything. And we'll sew forward, stop with that needle down. I like to line up these corners and then sew down. All right, now I'm going to flip it around and do the other side, but again, if you're chain piecing, you can just whip straight through, do all one side, flip it, and do the other. All right, so we're gonna press these seams open as well. You gotta be really careful that you're doing a lot of lifting and pressing because we have a ton of seams here and we don't wanna press anything going in the wrong direction. Go ahead and spend some extra time once you have the iron over the entire seam just to help get it super, super flat. We're gonna go ahead and hit the other one and then we'll go from the other side. I'm going to go ahead and give those seams that I just did a good press, and then we're going to do one final thing to get this block as flat as it possibly can be. I have an aerosol spray mister. I'd like to use this instead of water in my iron. Every iron I've ever put water in has eventually spit and got nasty, and so I've never put water in my Oliso, and it has stayed nice for years. I've had this for I think 4 years now, going on 5, and it is still going really, really strong. So that way I can go over it, get the effect of steam without it getting stretched out of place, and it turns the water into a fine mist so you don't get those water droplets that you sometimes get with a regular sprayer. And man, does that look good. We got all of our points looking fantastic, and it is just fabulous. All right, so now we're going to start doing our log cabin strips. So when I cut my fat quarters, I didn't do it in the most efficient way from a fabric cutting standpoint. What I tried to do was create a fade, so that way we would have the darkest fat quarter surrounding my white star, and then they would get lighter and lighter as we progressively went out. So when you look at your pattern instructions, you're going to be able to see the way to do it efficiently, which is where you're going to use your fabric to its fullest potential and have the least amount left over. You are going to need significantly more fat quarters if you're trying to do the fade, because you are not going to be able to use sections of the strips, and you'll have to save those to use in another project. So 2 options, one to have the aesthetically pleasing fade and one to cut as economically as possible. You pick which one you prefer. All right, so from here on out is a really easy log cabin. We're not going to be going all the way around. We're just going to be doing the sides, so that way the stars are always going to be in the corners of our block. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this right sides together, and if you want, you can pin. At this point, I'm pretty confident in the way I'm at, so I'm going to just go ahead and sew. I am going to sew with this one with the stars up, again, so I can be just to the side of where those corners are, so I can make sure I don't lose the points on the outside either. Whenever you do a log cabin block, you're going to have to press after every single seam. Again, I like to press these open. Whenever you're pressing to the underneath one side, you're going to lose a little fabric to that fold, and that can really add up when you're doing a log cabin block, and you can really lose a whole lot. I also am going to spray every single seam to get it as flat as I can in between, again, so I don't lose any of that length and to get a wonky log cabin block. All right, so now we're going to join our right strip to our block, and we're just going to keep going in that manner, sewing the bottom and the right, the bottom and the right, bottom and the right, until we are all done with our final right strip. So this is it. We have our final block. It is looking fantastic. We've got that nice fade going again on. Again, you don't have to do that. You're going to want to add on extra fabric if you're doing one of the larger sizes. We'll give you an estimation in the pattern, so that way you have an idea of how much you're actually going to need. Offhand, I haven't written it yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be at least 25% extra fabric, and then you'll have some extra strips that you can use in another project, or if you want to do a coordinating throw pillow or something, you'll have some fun with that. But again, you absolutely can just do it the economical way, use less fabric, and have some fun with it. But I really love how this is fading and how it's going to look in the entire quilt when it fades. So that will look super, super cute. All right, so the other ones are going to go together the exact same way, just you're going to have a smaller star and then you're going to have a larger star. If you want to do this in a very efficient way, doing it one block at a time is not it. What I would do is I would get all your stars together at the same time, because it's the same process, just different size pieces. Just make sure you're keeping the pieces together according to each star size, so you don't mix that up. Otherwise, your flying geese are not going to turn out the way they are supposed to. And then I would do it one set of blocks at a time according to the size star. That is going to be the most efficient way for you to do it at home and get this baby together and quilted so you can enjoy it. Thanks again for following along with today's video. Again, this pattern is called Star Sign, and the fabric is Celestial by Yelena Bryksenkova for FIGO Fabrics. It's the modern division of Northcott Fabrics, which is probably a little bit more well known. We love FIGO. We use it a lot for our Stashin with Stephanie Club. You can see it right behind me in this lovely shelf here. Now that we're filming in the new studio, we're going to be able to switch this background up all the time, and I'm really excited for it. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you are interested in joining the Stashin with Stephanie Club, we, for the last month, for the first time ever, had to limit signups because we were running out of fabric. So this month we are limiting new signups to a specific number. So make sure you head on over there right away if you want to get in and on this club. Again, you get a free pattern every month. You get access to a lot of the free patterns that we've done as part of this club. You get a discount on my book, Fat Quarter Workshop, which is an Amazon bestseller, which is super exciting. And by the time this video comes out, we should have them back in stock. The first printing sold out in less than 2 months. It's absolutely insane. I never thought that that would happen in my entire life. And then also you get special discounts on buying additional fabrics. So if you want to get a little bit more so you can do the finish kit to go with this, you absolutely can. Also, you get those 10 fat quarters for $29.99 a month plus shipping. So super fun club to be in. You get first dibs on this fabric. In this case, we're not sure that we're going to have that much left for kits this month because, again, our Stashin with Stephanie subscribers grabbed it first. All right, thanks so much for following along, and until next week, happy quilting.